am not moving this here runway.
This is our land.
You don't understand.
This belongs to the HOA now. That's the line she hurled at me, her voice rolling across my driveway like a sentence handed down from a judge. But behind her, crews were dumping gravel, painting huge numbers, and calling it a runway on my property without a single word to me. At first, I almost laughed, but the longer I watched, the clearer it became that everyone else had already accepted this madness as normal. Papers waved, neighbors nodded, whispers traveled, and suddenly I was the outsider on my own land. I swear, you couldn't invent a story like this. Tell me, what would you even say if your HOA laid down a runway right through your yard? The surveyor drove his third steel stake exactly where my grandfather's stone marker once stood. His shiny equipment blinked out numbers while an orange flag snapped in the morning wind like a warning I couldn't unsee. Each metallic strike felt like a hammer against memory. From my kitchen window, I watched with coffee cooling in my hands. This wasn't some kid's prank. This was organized property surveying, and every single stake fell on my side of the boundary. I stepped outside, boots crunching across frostbitten grass, the air sharp enough to sting my lungs. The first thing I noticed was the windsock flapping against the real breeze. Any pilot would laugh at such a rookie mistake, a joke far too risky for an actual flight path. Solar lights glared in rigid rows. Bolts sank deep like they were built to stay, mocking the roots my family planted here. These weren't throwaway fixtures. Someone had poured real money into permanent infrastructure, daring anyone to intervene. The family stone marker lay cracked beside the strip's center line. My grandfather placed that marker himself in 1942, chain in transit, calloused hands, sweat soaking through his work shirt. I knelt, tracing the carved numbers with dirt under my nails, remembering the weight of his hand on my shoulder when I was a boy. The deed matched those memories, the summers spent following him row by row, the smell of corn dust in the sun. The construction crew had bulldozed straight over 80 years of established borders, treating private land as though it were public ground. Orange cones marked staging areas where corn stalks once stood. Grader and compactor lined up like tanks at rest. Work lights glared, hungry for night. This wasn't a temporary access path. This was a runway invasion, and no one had asked the farmer who actually lived here. Diesel fumes hung thick in the morning air, mingling with the earthy scent of freshly torn soil. Denise Caldwell emerged from the HOA trailer, clipboard raised like a blade, strutting with the same smug stride she wore at every fence dispute and mailbox fight. She'd been the community president 3 years now, turning every minor disagreement into a personal crusade. Today she wore that same tight-lipped, chin-high expression, swagger without substance. Like an actress bluffing her way through a play, community emergency access, approved by proper authorities, she declared, waving official-looking papers like a victory flag. I glanced at the forms, impressive letterheads, stamps, signatures that seemed real from a distance. She'd clearly rehearsed this performance. Federal Aviation Guidelines require emergency landing strips, she continued, in that special tone reserved for explaining obvious truths to slow neighbors, each word sharp like a teacher scolding a child. I looked from her to the survey posts to those forms. The cold air sharpened my focus on this bureaucratic theater spilling across my family's land. Show me which agency authorizes construction on private property without easement or consent. She paused just long enough for doubt to flicker across her face. The papers rustled slightly in the breeze. Those official stamps suddenly looked more like stage props than real authority. The surveyor finished measuring and walked over with calm certainty. "Property line's clear as day," he said, pointing to the intact stone markers along the eastern edge. "Construction crosses private property about 300 feet. No easement filings on record with the county. This strip sits entirely on unauthorized land." His voice carried the cool weight of fact. Not opinion. Mrs. Henderson, 2 houses down, had been watching from her garden, pruning shears frozen in her gloved hands. She walked over slowly, curiosity overtaking routine. "They've been at it 3 nights straight," she said quietly. "Never saw any permit signs. County usually posts those bright orange notices for projects like this." Her worry carried more weight than any seal or stamp. I felt that old familiar heaviness settle in my chest. 20 years running FAA operations had taught me exactly what real approval looks like. Genuine permits list phone numbers you can verify. True emergency authorizations include supervising contacts. These papers had fancy wording but zero accountability, and that hollowness was louder than any engine roar. I called the county office. They picked up on the second ring. I put the call on speaker for everyone to hear. No permits filed, no clearances, nothing on record, the voice said. This airstrip sits on private land. No approvals for that address. Completely unauthorized construction. Let me be clear before this moves any further, because clarity matters. My name is Jake Hollis, director at the FAA, and yes, this farm is mine, now caught up in their reckless mess. To stay absolutely above board, I've documented every conflict in black ink, logged every call, and let county law move at its slow but steady pace, so no one can accuse me of twisting authority, abusing my seat, or bending rules to fit my will. An hour later, Denise came back with reinforcements, chin tilted higher. 2 board members flanked her like bodyguards, shoulders squared to lend weight. She slammed her bulging folder onto my porch table, tabs and highlighters lined up like blades, pages stacked like a desperate wall. Sunlight spilled over glossy covers, but her knuckles whitened and the papers trembled faintly, betraying nerves she couldn't mask. Fire Marshal emergency authorization for community access, she announced with force, raising her voice toward Carrie as she spread the stack of papers across my porch table, laying them out like courtroom evidence under a judge's unflinching eye. The signatures appeared neat, the letterheads looked convincing, and even the phone numbers seemed believable enough to pass a hurried glance. Whoever created these forgeries had invested dangerous precision into making them look authentic. The seals caught the sunlight and gleamed, but her performance faltered. Her hand shook, her eyes flickered sideways, her whole body trembling under the weight of a crumbling act. Calmly, I lifted my phone and dialed. Her stare locked on mine, unblinking and rigid. The fire marshal's line clicked, static filled the pause. Then Luke Bradley's voice emerged, steady, gravel-thick, roughened by years of sirens and 2 decades of smoke clawing at his lungs. I tapped speakerphone, and his authority rolled across the porch like a gavel slamming into hardwood, loud enough to make neighbors shift uneasily, lean closer, and hold their breath. The documents rustled in the breeze, their bold seals flashing in the sun as if mocking her. Fire Marshal Bradley speaking. What's the issue? His voice carried the weight of 20 years in uniform, seasoned and blunt. I laid out the situation quickly, the airstrip carved into my land, the supposed emergency clearance, the repeated claims of community access rights. Could he verify or deny that such approvals existed for this property? A simple check, nothing unusual, yet the silence around us tightened. Neighbors bending closer, the air pressing heavy as my words dropped like stones into still water. The phone crackled, amplifying every syllable. Luke's reply cut through Denise's performance like dawn light slicing through fog. No record, no inspection, no permission. Anyone saying otherwise was lying, flat out. His words landed heavier than the drone of a passing propeller, and a stunned hush fell. Neighbors shifted, eyes widening as they looked from me to her, realizing instantly that the clearance they had trusted was nothing but smoke and forgeries. Denise's face drained of authority, pale and hollow now. The once convincing forms sagged limp in her trembling grip, their stamps shrinking under scrutiny. Board members exchanged uneasy looks, chairs creaking as they shifted restlessly. What once seemed like clever maneuvering now stood exposed as crime. The entire neighborhood bore witness to the collapse. Gravel crunched outside as Rebecca Marston pulled up in a county sedan, badge glinting from her jacket, laptop bag swinging at her side. A veteran of municipal records, she could spot a real license in seconds, and miss nothing. Her arrival wasn't chance. Someone had already requested verification. The car engine ticked as it cooled, each metallic pop adding punctuation to the tension gathering on my porch. 0 filings tied to this property, Rebecca declared, after scanning the glowing records on her laptop. No construction permits, no aviation applications, no emergency rights of any kind. County files show absolutely no legal grounds for this so-called landing strip. She turned toward Denise slowly, eyes narrowing, voice firm and edged with iron. These documents pretend to carry county approval, but our system shows no trace, no entry, nothing to back them. The implications cracked like thunder rolling through a summer sky. Property insurance excluded aviation hazards and unpermitted construction. Standard homeowners coverage would never shield an unauthorized runway gouged into farmland. Liability wouldn't extend to trespass or fraud either. The looming financial fallout threatened to unravel years of equity and security. Right then, a call came in from a State Farm representative. His voice was sharp, metallic through the line. They had been alerted to unauthorized construction posing aviation safety risks, he explained. Coverage was suspended immediately pending resolution. Aviation sites required specialized and expensive commercial insurance, not residential. His tone left no room for doubt. True authorization always comes with real phone numbers and officials who answer. Genuine documents can withstand inspection. Forgeries disintegrate the moment daylight or authority touches them. Emergency powers exist only to protect the public, never to serve vanity. Fraud doesn't just void insurance, it wrecks stability, drains finances, and destroys trust. An investigator was scheduled to arrive the next morning. The HOA called an emergency meeting for 7 p.m. sharp. By evening, the community center was overflowing. Homeowners packed shoulder to shoulder, folding chairs jammed together like trenches. Every face was tense, arms crossed, the stakes personal. Property values, insurance hikes, looming liability. These weren't abstractions, but numbers tied to mortgages and savings. They wanted answers from the people they'd elected. When Luke Bradley entered, pushing open the doors with a folder under his arm, the room fell silent. His fire marshal uniform demanded attention, conversations cutting off instantly. Respect swept the crowd. This wasn't porch gossip anymore. This was law. His brass nameplate glinted under the harsh fluorescent lights, sharpening the silence. Denise sat rigid at the head table, the thick folder positioned like armor before her. She had armed herself with glossy charts, polished slides, graphs promising safety and improvement. The projector hummed, splashing bold statistics onto the wall in oversized confidence. But up close, sweat beaded her temples. Her hands shook as she tried to sell the show. Midway through the public comment period, Luke's radio burst alive with static. The dispatch came fast and clipped. Fire Marshal Bradley reports of covert transfers and unauthorized construction at your current location. County Sheriff requests immediate consultation on suspected bribery investigation. The words froze the hall. Every head turned, every chair creaked as people stilled. Silence pressed down, broken only by the heater's click and the sigh of air through the vents. Luke acknowledged the call with a nod, never breaking eye contact with Denise. His stance was calm, but his expression hardened into cold authority. "Ma'am," he said, his voice cutting like a blade. "I'll need to review those financial ledgers you've been concealing." Denise pushed the folder forward reluctantly, her confidence draining as neighbors leaned closer to watch. Luke opened it under the fluorescent glare, turning page after page. His lips tightening as his eyes traced the lines. He checked each entry against the records etched into his memory, his seasoned eyes moving with the patience of someone long accustomed to uncovering bribery. The sheriff's deputies slipped in during his review, notebooks poised, badges glinting under the harsh fluorescent lights. One by one, neighbors rose to speak. They had seen crews at night, heavy machines growling, strange materials deposited without explanation, equipment left blocking private property. Their voices overlapped, testimony piling higher and heavier, impossible to dismiss. Whispers of secret meetings, unexplained checks, HOA funds disappearing. It came out all at once, like a dam giving way. "These transfers are unlawful," Luke declared, his voice cutting across the crowded room. "Our department follows strict written protocols, standard forms, required formats, verified contacts. These ledgers violate every one of them. False names, hidden dealings, cover-ups throughout." His words carried the authority of years in service. And the silence that followed felt weighted with consequence. Denise snapped back, her voice cracking with panic. She accused me of twisting federal authority to bully neighbors over simple safety projects, pointing at me with a trembling hand. This is nothing more than a property dispute blown into abuse of power. But the crowd turned against her. Mrs. Henderson rose first, dirt still packed beneath her fingernails, her voice strong. "You stole money and built an airstrip on his land." "That isn't intimidation, it's a crime." Heads nodded. Murmurs of agreement spread, and the tide shifted sharply, drowning out Denise's protests. Luke moved into the aisle, measuring clearances, sketching equipment placement, his notepad filling quickly. A legitimate airstrip requires safety buffers, drainage, emergency access. This site fails every standard. His voice flattened as he added, "Bribery is a felony. Emergency powers don't authorize secret transfers or stolen property. Financial corruption is treated as a serious crime." The sheriff's deputy snapped his notebook shut, the sound like a sprung trap. He stepped forward, badge lifted. "Ma'am, you'll come with me now to face bribery charges and more." The hall fell into stunned silence. Every eye locked on Denise as the deputy reached for her arm. By Thursday morning, the coverage investigator arrived, measuring tape, camera gear, and 2 decades chasing illegal construction. His approach was clinical, unaffected by neighborhood drama. He photographed every corner, logged GPS points, and recorded violations scattered across the unfinished strip. His findings would determine policies critical to the community's financial survival. From my kitchen window, I watched his precise, methodical work. Insurance companies never hesitate when crime endangers obligations. Aviation hazards, illegal construction, and fraud always void policies. Decades of built equity now stood at risk of vanishing through administrative recklessness. While I prepped lunch, the foreman knocked on my door, boots caked in dried concrete, vest catching the afternoon light. Tom Morrison, 20 years in city infrastructure. He had overseen the strip's construction, convinced it was a sanctioned project. Now his face bore the weight of realization. Sweat streaked his hard hat. "She never gave us final payment," he said, pulling invoices from his pocket. Promised county reimbursement would cover it. Claimed emergency services had fully approved funding. His papers showed $30,000 still owed, staggering for a neighborhood project. His voice hardened as he continued. "She swore this was an authorized emergency project, county oversight, state aviation approval, federal compliance. We built to aviation-grade standards only because she insisted on it." His calloused hands shook as he clutched the unpaid bills. The insurance adjuster joined us, speaking with cold detachment. "Documentation is complete. The verdict awaits agency decision. Effective immediately, policies for all HOA properties are suspended. Insurance won't cover unpaid costs from unauthorized projects. Aviation risks and fraud exclusions apply. Homeowners need lawyers, not claims processors." The impact struck like a thunderclap. Property values endangered, insurance frozen. Liability spreading through unpaid dues. Residents had trusted their leaders to act lawfully, not siphon funds and approve illegal builds. Denise scrambled, clinging to spin. She insisted the federal inspector was bullying residents under the guise of safety. "He's abusing power to intimidate community leadership while we manage financial strain." But the neighbors weren't swayed. Mrs. Patterson of Oak Street cut in with a teacher's commanding tone. "You deceived us about resources and allowed trespass on private property. That isn't leadership. It's betrayal that drags down our property values and protections." Others joined in, voices sharp. "You lied to the crew about county payments. You lied to us about financing. You lied to coverage about permits. How many lies before you take responsibility?" In the midst of this, a banker arrived, briefcase polished, legal papers inside. He laid out mortgage violation notices affecting multiple homes. The illegal build had triggered loan acceleration clauses across the subdivision. Lenders never tolerate crime that threatens their collateral. "You have 15 days to fix these violations or face foreclosure," he told them. Mortgage contracts forbid illegal builds and criminal activity on secured land. The property must be restored within the time frame. Hope of community progress collapsed. Insurance frozen, loans accelerated, liabilities multiplying, values crumbling. One person's crime was dragging down an entire neighborhood. The banker closed his briefcase with a snap that sounded final. Mortgage firms don't bargain with crime. Saturday morning, crop dusting season began. Agricultural pilots flew carefully planned patterns perfected over decades. I heard the drone of a Cessna lifting from the east, familiar as summer harvests. Then everything changed. At 200 feet, the pilot broke formation, banking hard north to avoid ground obstacles. The climb was sharp, skillful, but clearly unplanned. Crop dusting relies on steady lines, fixed ground cues, wide margins. The engine strained as the aircraft fought for clearance. I pulled sectional charts from my office, spreading maps across the kitchen table. 20 years at FAA had drilled these flight patterns into me. Terrain markers, clearance heights, approach corridors. I knew them by heart. That strip cut straight across them, colliding with established agricultural routes. The maps told the story. Safety compromised, radio chatter confirmed it. Obstacles and lighting creating unsafe approach. Spray run incomplete due to unexpected structures. The pilot's tone was steady, professional, but carried weight. Between bursts, static hissed heavy with strain. Neighbors rushed outside, staring at the circling plane. Children pointed, unaware they were watching an aviation emergency. Parents exchanged nervous looks as the craft drifted too close to rooftops, not realizing this was no show, it was danger. The Cessna circled for another attempt, searching for a safe route. The pilot showed steady skill, but crop spraying requires stable corridors. Near homes, precision is everything. Sunlight caught the wings as the aircraft threaded a suddenly complicated sky. I spread the charts for neighbors crowding in, explaining, "Flight safety is federal. Planes cross borders freely. But trespass is local, land stays under state law." Both had been breached, pulling in both authorities. From the meadow, a hang glider appeared, its pilot caught off guard by ground fixtures never meant to exist. A calm recreational flight twisted into confusion by bright lights and painted markings. GPS data later revealed the detours forced by the rogue strip. Pilots had to shift paths to stay safe, but each deviation disrupted local operations. Air traffic depends on coordination, not surprise obstacles stamped onto maps without clearance. Mrs. Henderson stood in her yard, anxiety rising as the plane circled low. "Are we safe with pilots this close to our roofs?" she asked, her earlier curiosity replaced by fear. Neighbors began connecting the outlaw strip to risks landing squarely on their families. Aviation physics doesn't bend to paperwork. Planes need clear approaches, safe margins, and synchronized traffic. A rogue path destroys all of it, endangering both pilots and people on the ground. The crop duster tried a third pass, the pilot calm but tense. The craft roared overhead, engines straining to clear obstacles. From my window, I watched his steady hands working against hazards born from neighborhood politics. Federal oversight exists because emergencies ignore borders. Local dangers become federal the moment they ripple outward into interstate skies. The morning thickened with fuel fumes and unease as yet another aircraft edged into compromised airspace. "How many close calls before disaster struck?" By Monday night, the HOA hall filled for an emergency session. The air was heavy with dread. This wasn't a routine monthly meeting. It was a crisis assembly. The committee finally realized the crushing fallout of their president's reckless decisions. Insurance frozen. Mortgages accelerating, criminal charges looming like circling hawks. The situation demanded quick, unwavering leadership to protect what fragile stability the neighborhood still held. Patricia Williams, a committee member, took command, her gavel slamming against the table with an authority that felt almost judicial. "We are here to address criminal acts carried out without consent," she announced to the crowded room. Patricia, a retired lawyer and two-decade resident, now wielded the oversight she should have enforced sooner. The fluorescent lights caught the glare of her glasses as she flipped through emergency protocols, reading them word for word with determined precision. James Crawford. The treasurer rose next, a heavy stack of financial records clutched in his arms. He laid them out for all to see, proof that money allocated for the airstrip had been drained without authorization. Emergency funds had been spent without a vote, violating both HOA rules and fiduciary duty. $30,000 had vanished into an unlawful project, bypassing the very members who should have decided. His ledgers stretched across the table like damning exhibits in a courtroom, every number cutting into the silence. The picture they painted was unmistakable, unchecked abuse of power. Denise had acted alone, circumventing oversight, forging approvals, funneling community money into an illegal landing strip. The committee sat frozen, disbelief etched across their faces as the scale of her deception came into focus. Quiet whispers rippled through the hall, neighbors struggling to process betrayal from someone they had once trusted. At that moment, Michael Caldwell entered, Denise's husband of 15 years. His expression was lined with disappointment and the weight of looming legal fallout. The room shifted into uneasy silence as personal ties collided with public accusations. His shoes struck the linoleum, each echo breaking the stillness until he finally spoke. "I cannot defend criminal acts even from family," Michael said, his voice trembling but firm. The words carried betrayal, a marriage fractured by choices now burdening the entire community. "Forgery and trespass aren't improvements. They're crimes, and they require accountability." Denise tried one last plea, her voice faltering. The commanding tone she once held dissolved into desperation. She insisted her actions had been for safety and protection, for the well-being of residents. Tears blurred her makeup, streaking beneath the harsh fluorescent light. But the assembly remained unmoved. The evidence was too heavy to ignore. Mrs. Patterson cut in with the sharpness of a schoolteacher. True improvement doesn't rely on forged documents or trespass. Real progress follows the law, not criminal shortcuts. Her words drew murmurs of agreement, each nod tightening the circle around Denise's crumbling defense. The committee voted unanimously to remove her from the presidency, effective immediately. No debate followed. The evidence had already spoken. Emergency powers never excused criminal acts, and real leadership required staying within legal boundaries. The decision was recorded in official minutes, ink sealing Denise's fall. Talk of a class action lawsuit soon filled the room. Neighbors united to recover damages for higher insurance costs, plummeting property values, and escalating legal fees, all consequences of Denise's reckless fraud. The community's frustration gathered into a wave of rejection, pushing back against the abuse that had scarred both families and finances. Rebecca Marston, with cold precision, presented a forensic audit. Every dollar over $500 required approval, she explained, and the $30,000 airstrip had bypassed that entirely. Her findings struck like hammer blows, each figure deepening the wound of betrayal. Mid-presentation, a process server entered the room. His badge flashed in the fluorescent light as his eyes locked on Denise. Denise Caldwell, you are served. The charges, forgery, along with a civil suit for property damage and financial loss. 6 months later, justice moved through its channels. Every conflict procedure honored, every disclosure upheld. Federal and local authorities shared jurisdiction appropriately. I am Jake Collis, FAA Director. Throughout this process, I kept my ethics firm and clear, supporting legitimate law enforcement to the very end. On a crisp October morning, sunlight poured across courthouse steps as Denise emerged from plea negotiations. Shoulders slumped, she admitted guilt to avoid a drawn-out public trial. Her sentence, 3 years of probation under supervision. Full restitution without shortcuts, 200 hours of community service, and a permanent ban from HOA leadership. The conviction would follow her forever. Civil proceedings followed, securing financial compensation for residents. Insurance was reinstated once the illegal structure was removed, protecting homeowners' investments. A professional appraisal confirmed neighborhood value had been preserved. The rebuilding costs, inflated premiums, and legal fees were covered. Denise herself held personally responsible for every cent. Demolition crews arrived under court order, dismantling the unauthorized runway with care. Valid permits in hand, environmental precautions in place. The work was led by county engineers following the law, something Denise had failed to do from the beginning. Surveyors remarked the property boundaries, GPS aligning seamlessly with deed records. My grandfather's stone marker was restored, our family line honored after months of violation. Property rights were defended, not warped by fraudulent documents or abused authority. The farmland was restored. Soil treated, drainage corrected, consultants overseeing the healing of land once suffocated by concrete. The community, too, began to recover. The HOA established strict limits on emergency powers, required board approval for all projects, and mandated compliance training. Safeguards that would shield future residents from abuse. Integrity held steady throughout the investigation. Federal oversight stayed within its bounds. Aviation safety addressed by proper channels. Fraud prosecuted locally. Civil damages handled in tribunal halls. Jurisdiction aligned exactly as it should. Rebecca continued her work in county records, now respected for protecting public documents. Luke Bradley, the fire marshal, strengthened verification checks to block counterfeits. Other neighborhoods began reaching out, seeking guidance to avoid the same fate. Workshops and training spread awareness on HOA governance, liability, and accountability. The once illegal runway land was transformed into a thriving community garden, this time under valid permits and resident approval. A symbol of cooperation, trust, and lawful progress. Soon I began receiving emails from across the country, people asking how to prevent HOA corruption, how FAA jurisdiction actually works, how to spot fraudulent documents before harm is done. My role grew into one of education, building a toolkit for prevention and protection, and that's where this story ends. Signs restored, land healed, a neighborhood wiser. The lesson was clear: rules aren't just bureaucracy, they're protection. Crime only erodes the trust that keeps communities alive. If you've stayed through to the end, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Did this story hit you the same way it did me? Share your feedback, suggestions, or even a kind word. This channel is improving piece by piece, and I hope you'll stick with me. Until then, stay sharp. Thanks for watching.